The first thing you need to know is this: the moment that changed my life didn't happen in a courtroom or on a stage or with people applauding. It happened in a cramped office with flickering fluorescent lights when a man looked at me like I was invisible and said, "You're not leadership material. People like you don't last here." Yeah, that happened. At the time, I smiled. I nodded. I even thanked him for the feedback. Inside, though, something cracked, because that wasn't the first time I'd heard it. I'd heard it my whole life in different ways from different mouths dressed up as advice concern or jokes that were supposed to be funny. I grew up learning how to swallow anger and turn it into fuel, how to keep my head down, how to work twice as hard just to be seen as half as capable. You know what I mean? I wasn't supposed to be there, at least not according to people like him. I didn't come from money. I didn't have the right connections. I didn't sound like everyone else in the room. And I definitely didn't look like the kind of person they imagined when they said words like future executive or natural leader. Still, I showed up every day, early coffee in hand, ready to work. At first, I told myself it was temporary. Pay your dues, prove yourself, things will change. That's what they always tell you, right? And for a while, I believed it. I stayed late. I covered for coworkers who never returned the favor. I fixed problems that weren't technically my job because someone had to do it, and apparently that someone was always me. Then came the meetings. I'd sit there with ideas written neatly in my notebook. Ideas I'd thought through, tested, refined. I'd raise my hand, start to speak, and halfway through my sentence someone would interrupt me. Usually louder, usually more confident, usually repeating my idea 5 minutes later and getting praised for it. And every time I'd feel that familiar heat crawl up my neck. Do I say something? Do I let it go? I almost always let it go. The breaking point came during a project review. I'd been leading the actual work behind the scenes for months, managing timelines, coordinating teams, solving issues before anyone else even noticed them. When the presentation ended, the director leaned back in his chair and said, "Great work, Mark. You really stepped up as the leader here." Mark nodded, smiled, accepted the compliment. He didn't look at me. Not once. After the meeting, I pulled the director aside. My hands were shaking, but my voice was calm. "I just want to clarify something I said. I was the one coordinating that project." He looked at me like I'd just said something inappropriate. "Yes," he replied, "but leadership is about presence, confidence. You're very supportive, and that's valuable too." Supportive. That word followed me home like an insult pretending to be a compliment. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot longer than usual, hands resting on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. I could quit. A lot of people would. I wouldn't blame them. But quitting would mean they were right, and I wasn't ready to give them that. So I changed my strategy. I stopped waiting to be invited into rooms. I started showing up with data they couldn't ignore. I documented everything: emails, decisions, results. I asked questions in meetings that forced people to acknowledge who was actually doing the work. When someone tried to interrupt me, I didn't get louder, I got sharper. Let me finish. I'd say, calm, steady, eyes locked. The room would go quiet. Funny how that works. Not everyone liked it. One manager pulled me aside and said, "You're coming across as aggressive." I smiled and replied, "I'm coming across as prepared." He didn't have an answer for that. The tension built slowly like a storm you can feel before you see it. Whispers started. I was difficult. I was too ambitious. I was not a team player. None of that mattered when the numbers came in. My projects outperformed everyone else's. Deadlines were met. Clients were happy. Problems disappeared when I touched them. The real explosion happened during a quarterly review in front of executives I'd never met before. One of them asked a question about a process everyone knew was broken. The room went silent. People stared at their notes. I spoke up and said, "That's on me. I redesigned it last quarter. Here's why." I walked them through it step by step, explaining the impact, the savings, the growth. When I finished, the executive nodded slowly. "Why haven't we heard from you before?" he asked. Before anyone else could answer for me, I said, "I've been here. I just wasn't being listened to." You could feel the air change. That uncomfortable kind of quiet where truth lands hard. A week later, I was promoted. Not quietly, not as a favor, publicly, officially. Suddenly, the same people who overlooked me were congratulating me, acting like they'd always supported me. I let them. Not because they deserved it, but because my win didn't need their confession. The irony is, once I had the title, nothing about my work changed. I was the same person, same skills, same voice. The only difference was that now, when I spoke, people leaned in instead of looking past me. Here's the part no one likes to talk about, though. Winning doesn't erase what it took to get there. I still remember every dismissive look, every backhanded comment, every moment I questioned myself because someone else made me feel small. And I also remember the choice I made not to shrink. Because the truth is, people will underestimate you for reasons that have nothing to do with your ability. They'll confuse comfort with competence, confidence with correctness. And if you let them, they'll write your story for you. I didn't let them. Now I sit at tables I was never meant to reach, and sometimes I see someone like me on the other side of the room, quiet, capable, waiting. I make sure they're heard. Not because I'm generous, but because I know exactly how it feels to be overlooked. So here's my question for you. When someone is judged, dismissed, or boxed in by assumptions, who gets to decide their worth? The people who doubt them, or the person who keeps showing up anyway? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if you've ever been underestimated, or if you've watched it happen to someone else, share that too. These conversations matter more than we pretend they do.